Welcome to the You on the Camino podcast, for and about first-time pilgrims on the Camino de Santiago in Spain, with your host, guide and longtime pilgrim, Nancy Reynolds of the Camino Experience. Do you remember when you first heard about the Camino de Santiago? Maybe it was from a friend who had walked it, or a newspaper article. Maybe you saw the movie The Way with Sheen and Emilio Estevez, and something stirred deep inside, something awakened within you, and you felt the pull to know more. Hi, this is Nancy. In this episode, we are going to wander around in some basic questions. What is the Camino? Why do people walk the Camino? What does it mean to do the Camino? And what is it like? What is the experience of walking the Camino? And we will get personal. Why would you walk the Camino? What experience are you seeking? Finally, I will have a top tip for you at the end of the episode. I want to mention that this discussion is for anyone who is walking any of the Camino routes, whether that is in Spain, Portugal, or France. Let's get started. Let's get started with a question. Would you keep listening to this podcast if I told you I wasn't entirely sure what the Camino is? I know, what a crazy thing to say. I mean, I know what it is, but what is it? And why are people so drawn to it? And why do some people, like me, keep returning year after year? On one of my recent pilgrimages, I spent a fair amount of time mulling over the question, what is the Camino? And while we're at it, where am I? This is especially suspect, I admit, because I've spent so much time on the Camino over the years, and I love poring over maps and tracking my course along the way. So I do always know where I am on the route. You would think I'd have some answers by now. You may conclude then that the questions are more metaphoric than literal, as in a search for the meaning of the Camino de Santiago and the journey along one of its paths, and an understanding of where I am in relation to everyone and everything else. If you were to gather together 10 people who have walked the Camino de Santiago and ask them, what is the Camino? You're likely to get 20 different answers. I did this in a Facebook group, and interestingly, the responses I got were not about the history or origin of the Camino. No one said anything about the Apostle James, his ministry, how and where he died, how there came to be a shrine in his honor, or the plenary indulgence offered by the Catholic Church for completing the journey to that shrine. What they did talk about were their experiences, what it was like for them to do the Camino. I expected the responses to use the word pilgrimage in describing the Camino, but mostly they talked about the impact walking the trail had on their lives. They used words like self-discovery, freedom, finding yourself, deeply felt, medicine for the soul, life, gratitude, a spiritual journey, healing, humility, humanity. In other words, what many people who have walked the Camino seem to agree on is that beyond any possible description or explanation, the Camino is a deeply personal, life-impacting experience. What will the Camino be for you? I can't say. No one can. And what a wonderful question to explore at length. Let's look at some of the reasons people walk the Camino. Perhaps you'll find yours amongst this list. Will the Camino for you be a long walk with God, a walk of faith, and a chance to go deeper into your religious or spiritual tradition? Will it be a grand adventure to a faraway land where the language, customs, and food are different from what you know at home? Will it be a vacation for the soul, a chance to reset or recalibrate after several years of difficult global events or other deeply challenging personal life events that seem so ever-present? Will it be a homecoming for a seeking, wandering soul and a time to discover or rediscover your deepest desires and truest values? Or are you looking for a physical challenge, one that will have you simply savoring the hours, days, and weeks outdoors, walking through the beautiful Spanish countryside and hiking up and down mountains, a walkabout through a varied landscape, if you will? The joy for some will be found in what I call the United Nations around the dinner table, where people from dozens of countries gather to break bread and share their stories. Perhaps it's just enough to have a break from the daily routines at home, a getaway from the familiar and known. Or are you someone for whom walking the Camino is a pilgrimage in its truest sense? Or how about this? All of the above. Or none of the above. See, the thing is, only you can say what the Camino will be for you. We'll get back to that question. For now, let's take a brief stroll through the origin and history of the Camino de Santiago so that we can get to a modern-day jumping-off point. I freely confessed that I am not an historian, and I haven't spent any time researching the original literature and documentation on this topic. What I'm going to share with you is a high-level summary of the many accounts I've read on the origins of the Camino. First, let's break down the name, the Camino de Santiago. In English, this is usually translated to the Way of St. James. In French, Le Chemin de Saint-Jacques. In Italian, Il Camino di Santiago. In German, Jakobsweg. James was one of the original 12 apostles and a cousin of the biblical and Christian figure Jesus of Nazareth. Apostle James is the first of the 12 apostles whose martyrdom is mentioned in the New Testament of the Bible, and tradition has it that his remains are entombed in the cathedral in Santiago de Compostela. Santiago is also the patron saint of Spain, so he's a big deal in the Catholic tradition. It's believed that shortly after the crucifixion of Jesus, James was sent to the Iberian Peninsula to spread the good news of Jesus' resurrection. When James returned to Jerusalem from now Spain, he was beheaded by King Herod Agrippa. Legend has it that his body then was transported to the west coast of Spain in a stone barge and buried in a hillside, where it was discovered in the early 800s. The bishop Teodomiro discovered the remains, the local king confirmed the find, and the remains have been the destination for one of the most important pilgrimages in Christendom, along with Rome and Jerusalem, since shortly after that discovery. The original destination then for our modern-day pilgrimage was the tomb of the Apostle James, which is located inside the cathedral in the city of Santiago de Compostela in northwest Spain. Santiago is a beautiful, bustling city, a vibrant university town, and a destination in its own right. On any given day, the historic center of the city will be filled with pilgrims, tourists, travelers, and locals enjoying their own city. People arrive to Santiago on foot, by bicycle, on horseback, and as with any other European city, by train, bus, and airplane. People have been traveling to visit the remains of the Apostle James for over 1,000 years out of devotion to the idea that something holy is there. This is called pilgrimage. In short, the Camino de Santiago is a collection of pilgrimage routes, and traveling one of the Camino routes is considered a pilgrimage. What's that? Well, let's look at it. The first time I walked the Camino in 2005, I had no idea what pilgrimage was, and that was what I was sort of doing. I wonder, is it a pilgrimage if you don't know it's a pilgrimage? I think so, yeah. Shortly after my second Camino walk, I was visiting a Camino friend in Germany, and tucked into her bookshelf was a copy of The Art of Pilgrimage by San Francisco author Phil Cousineau. I have to say, that book explained me to me. It reached into my pilgrim heart and illuminated what I had been longing for, what had called me to walk the Camino. It also defined for me pilgrimage. Here's what Cousineau says about pilgrimage. A pilgrimage is a transformative journey to a sacred center. Pilgrimage is a spiritual exercise, an act of devotion to find a source of healing, or even to perform a penance. He goes on, always it is a journey of risk and renewal, for a journey without challenge has no meaning. One without purpose has no soul. That's from the introduction of the book. He goes on to say, making a pilgrimage is a way to prove your faith and find answers to your deepest questions. Let's see if we can unpack these statements. First, in the case of the Camino de Santiago, the cathedral in the city of Santiago de Compostela is the sacred center. All roads, all routes lead to the city and the cathedral, and to walk to the cathedral as a pilgrimage is to embark on a transformational journey, as Cousineau refers to it. What's interesting to me, though, is that this quote suggests that while the destination of a pilgrimage may be significant, the real pilgrimage is found in the journey itself. So even if St. James isn't a particularly significant figure for you, walking all or part of the Camino Trail can constitute a pilgrimage. These statements also suggest to me that even if you don't claim to have faith, or if you don't align with any particular religious tradition, you may still have some deep questions simply because you are a member of the human race. Those questions can be explored as you walk on the Camino, even if the destination of the cathedral in Santiago isn't significant to you. If you have a sense that your Camino walk will be a pilgrimage in any of these ways, I recommend reading Cousineau's book, The Art of Pilgrimage, before you go. And then I highly recommend reading it once you return, as an aid to processing or unpacking your journey. What if the idea of pilgrimage doesn't quite feel right to you, or if it's not why you feel drawn to walk the Camino? What if you're not walking for any religious or spiritual reason, but simply because you long for an adventure, or you want to explore the gastronomy of Spain while getting a whole lot of exercise? Well, good news. You may walk the Camino for any reason you like. But I do think it's worth spending some time exploring your reasons for walking, as those reasons will guide you in designing the Camino experience you are seeking. Here are some questions to ponder. What does pilgrimage mean to you? What do you want the Camino de Santiago to be for you? What have you heard and read about the Camino? What is calling you to do the Camino? What experience are you after? You may want to grab a notebook and spend some time with these questions, and then let the questions start to work within you. You may be surprised and delighted by what answers continue to reveal themselves. I could spend the entire day talking about the meaning and purpose of pilgrimage and metaphoric interpretations of the Camino, but I'm going to pause that and turn practical and literal for a bit. That's because I'd like to answer the question of what does it mean to do the Camino? In Spanish, in the language of our in-country host, you might say, hace el camino. The verb hacer means several things: to do, to make, to cause, to carry out, even to be. I love that one. To do a pilgrimage, to make a pilgrimage, to cause a pilgrimage, to carry out a pilgrimage, to be a pilgrimage. Which of these feels right to you? Doing, making, carrying out a pilgrimage on the Camino involves the physical act of walking from a starting point to an ending point. And what you'll be doing is this: walking every day or most days for however long it takes to get from the start to the end. If we were observing you doing the Camino, we might see you doing these things: carrying a loaded backpack with everything you're traveling with, or using a luggage transport service and carrying a small day pack. Looking for and finding food for every meal of the day by shopping in tiendas, visiting bars and restaurants, or maybe cooking. Sorting out where to sleep every day and sleeping in a different place every night for the duration of the trip. Doing laundry every day in a sink or a machine, hanging wet clothes on a line. Solving problems as they arise, often in a language you don't speak or understand. Meeting new people every day. Being outdoors in all kinds of weather, sunshine, rain, wind, cloudy skies, maybe snow or hail. Wearing the same clothes every day for the entire trip. Using a map, an app, and the regularly, frequently occurring trail markers to find your way. If your walk has a religious or spiritual purpose, we might see you visiting churches and cathedrals, attending Mass, or practicing other rituals of your faith tradition. What we wouldn't see so clearly is that you might be dealing with the emotional challenges of walking the Camino, the strain of being away from home, family, friends, and pets for an extended period of time, the excitement of meeting new people every day, and the point when that becomes tiring, the stress of being constantly on the move and sleeping in a new bed every night, feeling restless or unsettled when sleeping in rooms with strangers, being alone and feeling lonely, feeling physically exhausted and too tired to eat or shower at the end of a walking day. What else can we observe when we see pilgrims doing the Camino? On one of my recent walks on the Camino Frances, I did some observing along the trail and in Santiago, and I talked to a lot of pilgrims. I noticed that there is great diversity and variety among pilgrims. They weren't all doing it the same way. There were people walking alone and as couples, in groups they had come with and in groups that had formed along the way, in what might be called a Camino family. Some people were carrying big backpacks that looked really heavy. Some had smaller backpacks that didn't look too heavy. Some were wearing small day packs, and some carried only a bottle of water. I saw people wearing sandals, sneakers or trainers, high-top and low-top hiking shoes, and what I call badass hiking boots. People used 2 trekking poles, 1 trekking pole, a walking stick, or nothing at all. A lot of pilgrims had started in Saint-Jean-Pied-du-Port, and some had started closer to Santiago in Sarria. Oh wait, some had come from Portugal on one of the 3 Portuguese routes, some from Ferrol on the Camino Inglés, some had chosen the Norte or Primitivo route, and others came all the way from Seville in the south of Spain. Oh my goodness, and some had even walked all the way from their homes in other European countries. I talked to people who were staying in the albergues in shared dorms, and also to people who were choosing to stay in hotels and other places with private rooms. Now, most of these observations I just shared could be made on just one day only. But pilgrims don't all walk at the same time. No, they're spread out throughout the year, with some walking in the cold winter months, some in the lovely fickle weather springtime, some in the heat and long days of summer, and some in the shorter days of fall. Lots of variety, lots of different ways to do the Camino. Do you see where I'm going with this? I have to conclude there is no one way to do the Camino. Well, this makes perfect sense, doesn't it? We don't all live our lives the same way, so why would we do the Camino the same way? Yet even with all those variables, there still seems to be somewhat of a common Camino experience. I think that's because all pilgrims, at least all walking pilgrims, essentially are doing the same thing, even if they aren't doing it the same way. If we aren't all doing the Camino the same way, what does that say about our individual experiences of walking the Camino? Are they different too? What all pilgrims have in common is that they are all traversing the trail to Santiago de Compostela. Walking is walking is walking, and that is the common denominator. But let's imagine 2 pilgrims walking the same route at the same time. walking exactly the same daily stages, starting and finishing in the same town each day. One is carrying their backpack and staying in albergues, in the shared dorm rooms, and the other is staying in private rooms in hotels and guest houses, and using a luggage transport service to move their backpack each day. Will they have the same Camino experience? I don't think so. And this question frequently sparks a discussion of what is the right way to do the Camino. You may hear phrases like a true pilgrim or a Camino purist, or even that's cheating, which are used to argue that to be a true pilgrim, one must carry their backpack and stay in the albergues. It's an interesting argument, especially because the albergues are relatively new on the Camino landscape, as in the last 35 to 40 years out of over a 1,000-year history. And here's what's really interesting. Every albergue is different. So unless you and I stay in all the same albergues on exactly the same schedule, we will have similar but not the same experiences. If you and I are even one day apart, you stay at an albergue on a Monday and then I stay on Tuesday, our experiences will be different because we will be with a completely different group of pilgrims. If I happen to be 2 weeks behind you, it's possible there will be a different volunteer running the albergue, one that sets a different tone and attends to the pilgrims differently than your host did. Add in all the other elements of a Camino walk, the many different places to eat, the weather fluctuations throughout the year, who you meet on the trail and at the places where you sleep, the random acts of kindness you give and receive, the shepherd and herd of sheep you see but I don't, the bus or taxi ride you have to take to make up a few days, an injury that sets you back a week or even ends your Camino walk, the hand-drawn stamp in your credencial or pilgrim's passport at the place you stay, but your friend decides to stay someplace else, so he gets a different stamp that day. The choir practicing in the church in that small village, which only happens on Saturday. The festival you come across in September, if that's your walking month. Do you see what I'm getting at? The Camino experience is and will be as varied as the pilgrims who walked the trail. Let me say that again. The Camino experience is and will be as varied as the pilgrims who walked the trail. What will your Camino experience be like? To answer that question, let's add in one more element, and that is, you are at this point in your life, and you have your own personal reasons for wanting to walk the Camino. Do you know why you want to walk? Do you know what's calling you to the Camino? Whatever it is, the Camino is there for you. I'd like to help you put together a Camino experience that is unique and special. That's what we'll do with the roadmap I mentioned in episode 1. Did you grab your free copy? You can do that on my website, thecaminoexperience.com, right on the homepage, or by following the link in the show notes for this episode. Do you remember the first 3 steps of the roadmap? Here they are again. Go for a walk, do some research, talk to people. Now I'll give you the next step on the roadmap. Spend some time thinking about what you want. You've probably already heard some things that sound good to you. Walking in the beautiful Spanish countryside, meeting people from all over the world, enjoying the food and culture of the region, contemplating your faith or spirituality. Let me give you a few questions to ponder. What's calling you to walk the Camino? What experience are you after? Will this be a long walk with God, a grand adventure, a chance to reset or recalibrate, a time to discover or rediscover your deepest desires and truest values, a physical challenge, a walkabout? Or are you longing to represent one of the dozens of countries gathered around the dinner table? Are you looking for a break from the daily routines at home? Is this for you a true pilgrimage? Or is the answer to the question of what this will be all of the above or none of the above? Take your time with these questions. Grab a notebook, Use your beautiful imagination. Look at some photos or videos if you like. And keep in mind, you are unique, and your Camino experience will be too. Once you have an idea of the reasons why you want to walk the Camino, and once you have a sense of what type of experience you want to have, then we can start to answer all the basic questions first-time pilgrims ask right out of the gate. Questions like, when is the best time to go? How long will it take? Where do I sleep? Where do I find food? Who should I go with? How much will it all cost? Don't worry, we are going to answer all of these questions. I have many more episodes coming that will guide you as you discover what you want for your Camino experience. Before I wrap up this episode, I want to give you the top tip for this episode. Here it is. Get to know your expectations. We all have them. It would be impossible not to, with all the videos and books and movies and online accounts of other people's Camino experiences. If you get to know your expectations, you can begin to see which ones are realistic and which ones aren't, which ones are inherited or picked up from others, and which ones are all yours. You can ask yourself if you truly want what you're expecting, or if you'd like to expect and receive something else. You can also release your vice grip on ideas of what the Camino is or is supposed to be, and instead, this is the key, shift to an attitude of expectancy. I like to set intentions when I walk the Camino as a way to set the tone and to divert my attention from any preconceived ideas about what the Camino journey will be. So that brings us back to this. Grab a notebook and discover, what Camino experience are you longing for? What are you ready to receive? Thank you for joining me for this episode of the You on the Camino de Santiago podcast. If you'd like to know when future episodes are ready for you, click the subscribe button and we can both look forward to the next time we are together to talk about your Camino experience. And don't forget to grab that roadmap. The link is in the show notes, or you can go to thecaminoexperience.com. That's it. Bye for now.